Hello. So, welcome everyone to join our third workshop by World Peace Choral Festivals. My name is Andreas. And today we have invited the professors of conducting, Westminster Choir College, USA Yale University, Emeritus Professor of Choral Conducting, the founders and the conductors of Yale's Schola, Cantorum, and the co-founders of the King's Singers, Professor Simon Carrington. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Andreas. So I start off straight away. Okay, that was wonderful to watch that video from Australia. I haven't seen that for a very, very long time. And I think because it comes from my website, one reason or another, the rhythm was slightly out with the hands. So it was a curious effect. But because the syncopation was going like this, it sort of worked in a funny way. So thank you for playing that. Today I thought I would just talk about two contemporary American pieces, very different in style, and how one might approach them in a different way when training a choir. That's the focus of this website. So I've chosen these two pieces, one of them called Amara, Breath of Grace, by my friend John Rommereim, who's a very experienced conductor of student choirs in Iowa in the US. And I think this is a really wonderful piece. I just want to read you very quickly. The word Amara is an Igbo, which is one of the Nigerian languages, word for grace. And he says that the directness and simplicity of the tune, and especially the calm breaths between phrases, seem to evoke a sense of grace. And the piece is called Amara, Breath of Grace, and it's wordless. And so in a sense, anybody can sing it without any particular understanding of the language, which is always helpful, of course. Now, the nice thing about this is I think one needs to be in a certain sort of groove with your choral ensemble, which you perhaps would only use in a piece like this, and then it can cast its spell. John Rommereim has a very good, he's a fine baritone himself, and he has a wonderful sense of ensemble voicing and how you can create different sounds with student choirs or young choirs or choirs of any ages by the way he harmonizes, the way he sets the chords, the way he voices it, as we say. This piece was premiered by a group called Roomful of Teeth, which is an American group which has been extremely successful in the last 5 years or so. I'm delighted to say that some of the members are my former choir members and students from Yale. They specialize in contemporary music using experimental sounds and all kinds of things, particularly with a composer called Karen Siegel, who has been very successful, the two of them together, which is really exciting. I've worked with John mainly in Baroque music, so this is a completely different area. So we're going to talk about this piece. Now I hope some of you at least have the copies. It has this type of harmony. It's harmony that hangs in the air. It doesn't settle particularly, and a lot of it is kind of lifted up above a tonic, and it gives it a particular color to it. And John has marked his score very, very carefully, and it's very good discipline for young choirs to get a sense of real chamber ensemble, much like a string quartet would work, where every note has to be placed in a certain way, whether you use a down bow or an up bow, whether you lift the bow off or leave it on the string. All of these things become relevant, and they must make such a difference to a choir. I'm very much of the opinion that I love to go to a concert by a choir where they don't sound the same in every piece, and they really look as if they're absorbed in the music and they haven't just simply learnt it, rehearsed it, and are delivering it. We share their experience with them. Now, John uses the idea of silence as being very important to be in this state of grace and sense of being very, very calm. And I think the key is probably with your warm-ups at the beginning of the rehearsal or just a few minutes before you do a piece like this, is that you think about the singers being in a very calm situation. So I would probably, sometimes I do warm-ups where the choir sits rather than stands. They sit very quiet, and they're breathing through their nose to calm down themselves. They probably rushed in from somewhere else, so you need to calm them down. I like to have them sitting square on with all angles in the body, right angles, hands on the knees, a bit yoga-ish probably, but you're gradually settling down and having the breath taken through the nose. Now, if you have a copy of this in front of you, you'll see that for the first 2 bars, he has this little rhythm. And on the last beat of the bar, you breathe, and you breathe in a way. Now, of course, the conductor can choose whether how noticeably it is, or whether it's just a relaxed sound and you're aware of people breathing, which would probably be the way I would do it, but you can certainly, you can have any kind of breath intake sound, and that has to be in a rhythm. It must be in a strict rhythm. John suggests a quarter equals 50, so it's quite a slow pace, and he marks very carefully the dynamic. And this is where, for a choir to go, now I'm not sure I can do this any longer. The days when I could sing absolutely dead accurately with a hum, I'm afraid, are almost gone now, but I'll try my best. And it has this mezzo di voce in the middle, crescendo diminuendo, and then the next bar, the bass part, so it comes up and it comes down, and the last note is staccato, and then you have the intake of breath. And by the time you've done those 2 bars, you're in a certain space, and with any luck, if you've communicated that to your audience, everybody is sitting there with a similar, how can I say, attitude to life or something. You've settled them down, and they're just thinking about life in general, in a very, very calm way. Now, I'm very keen with warm-ups, and have been for many, many years, that I never do a warm-up which is basically the same as I did the day before or last week. It's always different, and it has as much as possible of the training of being able to recognize and sing intervals accurately. Because, as many of you will know, I'm sure, that the problem normally with sight singing is the inability of young singers to be able to pitch intervals in the same way that an orchestral player can. And this is always a bit shaming. I think we choir people, we need to be able to do it just as fast and just as well as orchestral players. So you have to, the opening bass line, and this is simple, is okay? You'd think that would be straightforward, and actually it's probably the easiest part. The tenors, on the other hand, they have a fourth. As soon as you begin talking about fourths and thirds and shifting and sixths and fifths and so on, one's into an area where thought is required. Now, the way John has voiced this, you have very subtly different rhythms. Each bar, the rhythm pattern is slightly different. And I find this sort of thing very exciting with young singers, because they really have to think. They can't anticipate what it will be. They need to be able to look at it, dissect the rhythm, and read it. So, assuming we are sitting still, we've been calm, we've done our breaths in, we've started to think about rhythm, we're going to be doing quite a lot of humming. He uses humming as the basic sound, the sound from which we begin and to which we return. And humming is such a wonderful, in many ways, in my opinion, I hate to say, but choirs can sound at their very best when they're humming, because there are no vowels to break up the sound and to spoil the colours and so on. So the way they hum, which loose lips, not tight lips, but loose. So this, I always teach the space between your skin and your top teeth. The space in there, and hopefully it centers the sound around this area. In music like this, there is a loud section in the middle, and it does need to get loud, but it never needs to get sort of voluptuous or heavy. it's all about having a very clean sound. The way this piece is written, clean harmony is very, very important. So I would probably do some humming with exercises, different ones. Now raise the upper note by one tone. Now raise the fourth note by a semitone. Anything of that sort, just to make the choir members sing in unison and sing it very accurately. So I'll make sure I get through this piece because I don't want to miss anything here because it's so full of wonderful things. So it starts with humming, and it has, as I described, the different rhythms with the crescendo and decrescendo, and then the breath in, and then, and he uses this harmony a lot, that's spacing, which gives a wonderfully transparent sort of sound. And the other thing is the choir needs to be able to start with no or grace notes of any sound. And that's a very good discipline. So you take your breath in with the pitch right here. As you breathe in, you have the pitch already, it's right there. And then you just return the breath, pitch comes out. And a piece like this is critical from that point of view. 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth bar. We have a fifth there. And as you'll have noticed if you have the score, there is an improvised instrumental part over the top. In the published score, it's a saxophone. Choir's holding harmony. In the version you're going to hear at the end, because I'm going to play you a version, it's actually in the key of E flat, and a clarinet plays. And that works very well. If you have no access to a saxophone, a clarinet, and you can obtain the part in E flat, choir can sing from this part and just sing down a semitone. And that all works fine. Now let's look at measure 6. And here you have people moving very subtly on the beats as indicated, strict but not kind of aggressively so. So the basses have to go. Now John has crescendo in the first bar but not in the second bar. Obviously if you're going up to the high note, you have to think very carefully, and then you have an 8th note rest, and then it needs to come down. In my years in the King's Singers, of course, we spent a lot of time making sure we could go, and the harmony would come absolutely out of the air and would have nothing to interfere with it. So I think to practice lines with voices, you can with the basses just practice that line, and then you can do the articulation. If you look at measure 9, for instance, the articulation, the bass part is you will probably use a little throat glottal on the second main beat, like a pop singer basically, and then the tenors have let's see, that wouldn't have done. If that was a recording, that would have had to have been a retake. Now we get into the land of dissonances. The tenor has an A, and the others come in like this. So when the sopranos get to their G sharp, the tenor A is a dissonance. It wasn't at the beginning, so the tenors have to reflect that. And all this is very good for ensemble singing. They would have to go, and they would strengthen the tone just a little bit so you feel that dissonance, and then everybody jumps down. This sort of thing. When you look at it on paper, it doesn't look much, but it can be magical, in my opinion. At the end, I'm going to play you a recording made at this course I run at the Yale Summer School, or had been doing until COVID struck, where students, not yet, don't play it yet, whoa, just getting it ready, okay, because I'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll play it at the end, another 5-10 minutes, I think. So there you'll see it conducted by one of the students at the course, actually, who did a beautiful job. He's a young man from, at that time he was at the Schola School of Music in McGill University in Montreal, and he was chosen to conduct this piece, and I'll tell you how that works in a minute. So lots more of this type of thing. The singers have to be aware whether the chord above them is a three-part chord with no consonant harmony, no C sharp for instance, and what do they do about that, and how the chords strike and the kind of tone that they need to use to make the harmony work. This type of harmony needs a particular type of sound. It needs to be quite airy. I used to sometimes get in trouble with my colleagues when I taught at the New England Conservatory of Music, my voice teacher colleagues, because I would sometimes encourage the choir to sing with more air in the sound. And as many of you will know, voice teachers not so fond of that. I think it gives a nice colour, ooh, ah, rather than very focused. It just depends what the piece demands. And I think if you can move from one to the other, it makes your voice more flexible, more interesting. If we look at measure 13, which is a 6/4 bar, and if you're conducting this piece, I think you have to be very careful with the beat, because the clarinetist or saxophone player is trying to take the score that's written in front of them, but improvise slightly. So it needs to be very clear as where we are. And so in a place like this, where John has a rallentando, clarinet plays, or something of that sort. I didn't play quite right, but the choir slows down, so the conductor is very good at conducting exercise. Anybody who teaches conducting, you've got about 2 beats in this bar, that's bar number 13, where you really need to subdivide in order to get everybody to stay together. And then the clarinet hangs there, and then suddenly the choir, who've been humming, come in on unison. And that little line alone, that's a wonderful line for a warm-up, because of the pitches. Minor 6th, 5th, minor 7th, minor 6th, they're all there, and if you call them out by name, people need to get them. If they can't, they need to go home and practice. That's, I'm afraid, the way I've always taught this type of thing. It's partly to do with having been a young chorister in the English system, where you pick it up as you go along by simply having to do so. You've got to know the key you're in, and you gradually learn from people around you. And in many ways, in my humble opinion, that is a more efficient way of learning to sight sing than being taught a method carefully day by day. It all helps, but just being dropped in it like a high school clarinet player, that's a good way to learn. And a phrase like that is very good. Now, the other thing about a phrase like that is, I'm not even sure I can do it now. We're changing from hum, ooh, and you try to use the ooh sound, so it has a little bit more colour, but otherwise in the same place, because by that means you'll get a lovely warm sound, and then you've got to be able to go from oh to the o sound. Now this is too high for me now. And you have to be able to hit those pitches straight on, smooth. I often say to choirs, imagine there's a glissando, but don't glissando. So, ooh, ooh, ooh. So you relax the throat, and then imagine you're sliding down, but you don't slide. So you can go smoothly there. And that's always very useful. Unison goes on measure 16. Then we have the forte again, but in harmony this time. And then we have this thing that choirs can do so well, if well trained, which is a chord which crescendos. And it goes, oh, and stops without a big cutoff. It's sort of, you can do the big cutoff, but right here, I think it needs to be unaccentuated. Oh, and then the altos sing alone. Oh, diminuendo. Gone are the days, as I said at the beginning of this, when I can demonstrate properly. But that's what we try to do. And if I'm in a choral rehearsal in a choral room, I think I can just about still do it. But sitting here at my home after a large lunch, not so easy. So then we have other effects of this kind, another ritardando, and the clarinet gets quite involved here, the saxophone, with a lot of little cadential bitches, cadences. Single voices starting, and then chords coming in different ways, but it's all very carefully set out, and the dynamics, the shading are all very clear. And the great thing is, if you can get the choir to go from hum to oo to o and then to ah, being a vibrant, spacious sound, but not spread and not overly resonant. Ah, ah, more like sighing. Ah, that sort of sound, rather than very produced, which is, you need that sometimes, but not necessarily when you've got lots of parallels harmony. And in a way, let's face it, we're sort of imitating backing vocalists in pop tracks and that sort of thing. It's a different sort of colour, but it has a lot of overtones in it, and it can be any of these harmonies can be very clear, and the overtones can spin above your head. If you can get I suppose it's a question of blend, really, and that's where you try to have the mouths in a shape with not too coiled over, but it got enough clarity, a little bit of teeth in there for a little bit of brightness without it twanging. And this is for you to judge, of course. You're trying to get the kind of colour which you enjoy and which suits the music. And in a way, that's the key. Now, what this piece does, it's very calm, but in the middle, it does get a little bit agitated, and there's an accelerando, which reaches up to double speed. By the time you get to measure 31, you're at double speed. You're at 108 as opposed to 50, and it's really flying along here. And it keeps tempo, and it goes from forte to piano to crescendo back to forte, and you're buzzing along, always on the R vowel, then comes to the O, then the R again, and then you have some... it introduces a D natural and changes the harmonic language slightly, goes very high in the sopranos, and the tenors, of course, are fairly high, but if they're using their spinning high register, it can all be in the kind of upper register for tenors and high singers. And then it slows down from measure 43, goes to O and back to oo, and it's a piano slowing down. And you have a couple of bars where the choir sustains a half note and all kinds of little things like that. And then you have these sort of harmonies, measure 51, where you've got basses humming, tenors, altos singing in their chest voice on a low F sharp, and then the C sharp there, and that's got a certain colour to it. And then you have that chord, which is one of the most dissonances in the whole piece, and it has to be very well sustained, and the tenors move. And then we have octaves, and then this chord with that minor ninth there, which needs to be very clear. And then we go, and it all sounds rather questioning and mysterious, and the clarinet goes, we move to there, fermata, and then it comes back to the opening figure, and John works his way around some of this using the same sort of techniques, and right at the end he varies it very slightly, and you have which is a harmonic progression which is roughly the same, but it's not exactly the same, and then another one. This type of thing is playing with little fragments, and I feel if you can get it to the right position and it communicates with the choir and the choir can communicate with the audience, you can kind of get them guessing and wondering and just sort of reflecting on life in general. So I find this piece full of lots of little subtle touches which require a lot of precision and concentration, and that's one of the great things about it. And you have to feel the air intake of the ensemble. People used to say in King Singer's days, you know, how do you people all start together at the same time with nobody conducting? And of course, sometimes we didn't, but we always hoped to do so. And it's the intake of breath, which is the key. And where you start your pitches and how you can turn that corner. Okay, now we'll play this recording from my Norfolk course, and this is the choir there, conducted by William Duffy, with a wonderful young lady, Noemi Salai, who was Hungarian and who happened to be at the summer school course, and she agreed to play this, trained at the Juilliard School, and she sort of improvised and also played based on John Rommereim's score. Okay, so you can, with that performance, interesting, that group, we just meet from a Monday and we work during a short week. Saturday is the concert, on a big program. Everything has to be learned very, very fast. But good musicians, and it's really, one has to concentrate carefully, and you can hear there how hard it is to have a choir sing like a wind ensemble, starting on the beat all together. Most of the time there, that worked extremely well, but you can obviously hear the odd moment. Here there was no retake, or we just had to do it. You can hear, but it's for a choir that works together all the time and really gets the sense of it happening as an ensemble. I think that's a very good example, so I hope you enjoyed that. Now the other piece, I'm also going to play a recording from Norfolk, simply because in some ways nowadays, that although I don't conduct everything, I have students conducting, but it's often one of the better choirs I can assemble. This is another piece we did a different year, completely different. It's an arrangement by Karen Siegel, an American composer, lady, of the Simple Gift tune. Which many of you will know worldwide, I suspect. It immediately, to my mind, conjures up Aaron Copland and American wide open harmonies of the prairies, and a certain sound there which we are so familiar with from all sorts of areas, but perhaps particularly film scores, or in my case, westerns. Western films with that kind of big sky. When I first went to America, I taught for 7 years. My wife and I, we lived in Lawrence, Kansas, and I had a wonderful choir there in the Midwest, and that's big sky country. You could look out in the evening and the sky would be way stretching over. So that kind of comes to my mind, and it's got a certain colour. Now what Karen has done is taken the melody, and she has, in a way, sort of played with it a little bit and fragmented it and added and coloured it and decorated it in a very, very subtle way, in my opinion. I first heard this sung, I did a couple of years, 3 years actually, teaching at the University of Birmingham in England. I used to go up there once a week and choir there, and my very final concert coincided with a visit to England by the Yale Glee Club and my former colleague from Yale, Jeffrey Dahmer. And they came and they sang this piece the first time I heard it. And I was, he's got a big group, of course. I was very impressed by it, and you can find their recording, not there, but at Yale, on the web as well. Oh, and by the way, when it comes to the other piece, Amara, I should have said that on the GIA website there is another recording of a very nice recording in the key for saxophone, so you might prefer to listen to that one. That's available there. Now, what Karen does is that she takes little bits and pieces of the melody, and it requires a different type of singing. It needs everything to be very much in the front of the mouth, which I find a very good vocally as a warm-up exercise. A lot of all this kind of thing, making sure the air is moving freely, and you're very aware of the tip of your tongue and these spaces here, because you're not going to there's no time to open it up to a big sound. It gets like Amara, actually. It becomes, there is a climax, but it's chamber. Even if you have a choir of 600, you know, and I have to say I've done mainly chamber choirs, but I've also worked with something like the Utah All-State Choir, which was 900 singers, and I would have done a piece like this with them because it's such good training. So tip of the tongue, and I think any kind of little exercise, it opens, tis a gift to be simple. Anything of that sort, where you've got different intervals, and then you go and you're really thinking about your pitching. And this piece, because it has a series of little figures which are, again, fragments of the tune. It starts with the sopranos and altos only. A lot of that sort of thing. Playing with seconds, which have a particular colour, usually major seconds, but sometimes minor second. and that is a gift to be free, free, to be free. 'Tis a gift. And then she introduces on the piano pedal notes. They're actually above the choir, but it's a sense of a binding pedal note, very subtly introduced, and everybody has to count their time very carefully because you've got 4, 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, all kinds of stuff happens during the piece. And that's the setup. So conductor has to be very clear, very neat, and in a way I think of Karen Siegel here as a kind of teasing. These are teasers with little ideas of to kind of build us psychologically towards the arrival of the main melody. Interestingly, Jeff Dahmer's recording is slower, and in fact he does what Karen says, 92, doing it with the chamber choir. I did it a bit quicker than that, more like 112, something like that, but that's entirely up to you. It starts with the top two parts, and then after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bars, the tenors come in, so we're starting from the top and working down, and gives more chance of a little bit, the harmony gets a little bit more kind of tantalizing, a little bit more dissonant here and there. Piano continues to play octaves, and they sing along, and then the basses come in. So we're into this kind of harmony, kind of tight harmonies, quite fizzy sort of harmony, which always, if you can get it right, overtones fly, and people, you see, my impression is that an audience sits on the edge of their seats listening to this. What is happening here? Why are we doing this? Who's singing that? And because you have plenty of E vowels, free, to be, anything like that, very good for the sound. And what she does towards the end of the intro, she has just 2 beats where the choir sings together in harmony, if I can get this right. So you've got a 4-part chord there on the word free, which if they're nicely spaced and placed with their voices, it won't be too fat, but it'll be very clear. And then another pedal note comes in, and then the tenors and basses have little fragments. And then finally, they are singing, be in the valley of love and delight, love and delight. Piano comes in, bass starts off, 'tis a gift to be simple. And we have verse 1 with the tune in the bass and the harmony above it, just subtly decorating, not overly dissonant, but just enough to kind of tickle your fancy. That's the way I see about it. It's like somebody just sort of tickling a little bit here and thereby bringing out the sense of the lyric, basically. Yeah, and when we find ourselves in a place just right, and on right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. And that's all unison. Love and delight. Piano goes down an octave. And then we have tenor and basses going over this little figure which has been suggested earlier. And then the top 2 parts. And these words, and I always suggest to people that they think about the English or American language not just a series of vowels, but as in good speech, I have to stress, when true simplicity is gained, that's the sort of thing in the English language can do better than any other language, in my humble opinion. To bow and to bend we won't be ashamed, because it centers the voice, it concentrates on the sort of humming of those consonants, the N and the M. To turn, turn, turn will be. And here's a good conducting exercise. This is bar 37 if you have the score. See if I can get this right. Be our delight till by turning and turning we come around right. I got it wrong. Turning and turning we come around right. Yeah, you've got to be able to conduct it across. I practiced this, I had it dead right. Be our delight till by turning and turning we come around. Turning and turning we come around right. Yeah, it's a good exercise. You wouldn't need to do that, but just to try it. Now, she also introduces an E flat into this. nicely set out in the sense that the little stresses are put wherever they occur in the text, even though they're not on the main beats, and that kind of thing is important to be aware of. So the E flat comes out just like a little tease, and we're going to hear more of it later on. The pedal at the moment is a C. Turning and turning we come, turning and turning we come around. Right there, I got it finally. Right, then she starts the new verse, and this is where Karen writes her own words. And it's a second verse: "'Tis a gift to be grateful, 'tis a gift to be here, 'tis a gift to be loved by neighbours we hold dear." So this adds a little dimension to the old melody and the old sense of it and the context of it. And I think it works very nicely. And she does this, everybody's in harmony together. "'Tis a gift to be here, 'tis a gift to be loved by neighbours." It's all this kind of harmony. It doesn't spread very wide, but it's very clear. And there are lots of fourths and fifths, which gives a certain colour. It's not too fat. But then she comes, "And when we stand up for," then we have a low F in the bass. It's the first time the basses have been down below sort of C and D. And it, of course, immediately the colour changes, and you have the spacing chord with the ubiquitous ninth, which is so popular nowadays, and it gives us a nice colour to it. "And when we stand up for what we know is right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight." And then pedal note comes in again, and the basses and tenors. Then we have the E flat, which is gradually introduced. It's never sort of overwhelming, but it's just there. It's a bit like the G's. And then she takes the E flat. There's a little dialogue between the sopranos and the altos, who are in E flat with the pedal here, and the tenors and basses, who are in F, and we're playing with it. This is the link between the main chorus and the verse. So she keeps that up, and you can tell, I hope, from even me tinkling on the piano, that how it's important that everybody gets a sense of being very clear at the front, as if you're whispering to somebody and you're speaking with real intensity, but not too loud. Nobody must overhear. But you're sharing something very important. And I think this is the spirit of this piece. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free. And you're sharing it as an idea, you're not shouting it from the mountaintops. 'Tis a gift to be loved by neighbours we hold dear. And then we come to the chorus. And now the tune is in the tenor. This is measure 61. And we're all in block chords. And lots of 6/4 with added ninths and little things like that, which are just kind of tasty. Can't think of a better word. Just makes it all sound very nice. I've sort of felt with this piece, in a way, it's a bit like assembling a jigsaw. You've got the jigsaw in front of you, you're taking a couple of pieces here and a couple of pieces here, gradually putting it together, and then finally you come and you sit back and you say, "Oh my word, how wonderful." And that's what happens when true benevolence is shown. With strangers around, we won't be alone. To love, love will be our delight. And this, when she comes to this point, the tune is in the tenor, the sopranos go to the top F, the highest note they sing. Come down to unison again, and when we go back to as we were at the beginning. And then the new colour, an extra colour, is the basses and tenors. Fourths and fifths, a drone, almost like a drone from a piped instrument of some sort. Very nice colour, and sopranos are on the top. And it teaches, to my mind, it teaches young singers how the importance of accurate pitching, because in this kind of writing, There's no obvious choice what the note could be, so you can't guess. You have to read, absorb, and pitch. And when, so the basses and tenors go, and the altos. Valley, and we crescendo on a vowel, valley, ping from the piano, and young, pretty city. And here, it's she extends the melody. Felicity is gained on that sort of harmony, and the piano. Not easy for the pianist, very easy to lose your place. And when true benevolence is shown, sustaining these important words, gained and shown, making us think, we won't be ashamed, we won't be alone. Also good not to sing too heavily on the tonic, on the first beat of the bar. We won't be alone, rather than be alone, which you will hear, unfortunately. People are so wedded to the bar lines. So that she does that so nicely. And what happens then? We've been at the climax, and now it's gradually, the harmonies are resolving. We have a lot of this hanging about. We're on the supertonics, we're not on the tonic, we're kind of hanging in the air, and then we won't be alone, and she comes down, we won't be alone, but still a little bit of questioning hanging, and then the piano. And then it is the gift, and fragments to the end. And this builds up to a small mini climax, and then there's a written out fade. And this reminds me so much of my King Singers years, where in those days in recording studios the fade was used a lot at the end of tracks, and it would go away. But there it was done, of course, by somebody at the recording desk. Here it's she writes it so nicely, goes round, to be free, to be free, to be free, to be free, and then it ends, hangs in the air. Tenor part goes, and we end on those fourths and fifths, and the piano says, this is the tonic. And only the piano does that. So this is, I think, a very, very interesting piece, and very, very effective. But perhaps most important, no, not most important, but it's a very good way to help young, particularly young singers, absorb how important it is to be detailed in the way they look at a score and what the composer has put in there. Both these composers mark their scores very carefully with plenty of diminuendos. Particularly diminuendos are important. I think choirs perhaps are better at making crescendos than they are diminuendos. And in so many ways, if a choir diminuendos, but keeping the attention of the listeners right there with them, it can be extremely effective. So that when the final chord ends and the silence in the room, to me as an erstwhile performer, we used to say, actually in King Singer's days, you know, what was the most important moment in the concert? And it seemed a bit sort of casual to say, well, actually it's the silence that followed the last chord rather than the last chord. Because that means that you've held people, you've got them in your hands there, and they're thinking, and the silence before somebody, and usually, unfortunately, there was somebody who would always go, because they wanted to show that they were quick and on the case. But the best moments were the silent moments. And I think both these pieces have that power and to show off. And you don't need great, big, well-developed voices. Young voices, fresh, eager, wanting to communicate, not overly trained, i.e. they can produce their voices in different ways. They're not wedded to a certain type of singing, which to me is so important. Perhaps let's listen to the recording now. This is another student conducting. This was Madeline Woodworth, who at that time was a student at Yale actually. And she is conducting with Ilya Politeyev, my wonderful colleague, playing the piano for us. He's a professor of piano at McGill, indeed, in Montreal.
Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free, to be free. Tis a gift to come down to where we ought to be. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to come down to where we ought to be. Tis a gift to be simple, to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to come down to where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, could be in the valley of love and light. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to come down to where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, could be in the valley of love and delight. Tis a when true simplicity is gained, tis the power to envy of the free. To turn and turn, we see on the eyes till I turn and we come around. Tis a gift to be grateful. Tis a gift to be here. Tis a gift to be loved by neighbors we hold dear. And when we stand up for what we know is right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. Tis a gift, tis a gift to be grateful. To be grateful. Tis a gift, to be grateful. To be grateful. Tis a gift to be loved by neighbors we hold dear. Tis a gift to be loved by neighbors dear. When true benevolence is shown, with strangers around me, not be alone. To love and be our delight, and by love and be come on. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to come down to where we ought to be. When we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley. When true simplicity is gained, when true benevolence is shown, we won't be ashamed, we won't be alone, we won't be ashamed, we won't be alone, we won't be ashamed, we won't be free. Tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to be free, to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Tis a gift to be free, to be simple. Tis a gift to be free, to be free, to be free,
So that's very interesting for me to watch that again now, because it's a little while ago, and it's the kind of piece where you think, "No, I wonder why we didn't do that, and why didn't we do this, and one thing and another." It's so fascinating how difficult it is to get something like "'Tis a gift, 'tis a gift," not to sing "'Tis a gift" or "'Tis a gift, but 'tis a gift, a gift." Very difficult, and everybody, we worked at that so hard. And yet now I think about it, I think I could have suggested a couple more things, but it's very nice performance, it's clear. I thought again, it might be my website, I must check this carefully, the beat got out of time with the sound, so this might be a Zoom issue. But rest assured that there is a version where it all fits together. And I do commend both these pieces to you, I think, for choir training, apart from just being pieces to perform in concert, but they have various ingredients which appeal to me very much as kind of ways of sharing ideas about music with your singers, which is what the whole thing is about, really, so that everybody, nobody's being dictated to. You're sharing ideas about how something works best. And very nice for me working at Norfolk, because I have these young student conductors who are very good musicians, and they have their own opinions as well. And we discuss it all. Everybody rehearses all the pieces in the program. It might be an hour's program, and all 10 conductors rehearse all of the pieces. And then the day, 2 days before the end, I finally decide, it's the hardest job, who should conduct which piece. And so everybody's had a chance to experiment with conducting the pieces and the different disciplines that are required, and have shared their own musical ideas. And so both these pieces come from that context. And of course we also do Brahms and Bird and all kinds of different styles, all of which require different techniques. So thank you for watching these two pieces, To Be Free by Karen Siegel and Amara, Breath of Grace by John Rommereim. Thanks to those two composers. And let us all look forward to getting back in front of one's own singers and making music together, not remotely as we're doing now. Hasn't it been exhausting? And I take my hat off to all the conductors who've been doing this this past year and a half and have been so inventive. I don't think I could have done any of that. So I'm so impressed by everything that everybody has been doing to keep the thing alive. Teaching conducting by Zoom works quite well, but you can't have it direct. They have to conduct a tape, and you have to make suggestions and so on. Anyway, thank you very much. I think, I'm not sure, Andreas, are you there? Selena, are you there? I think
Yes.
my time is running out. And so, are you going to say something, or shall I just say thank you very much and goodbye to everybody?
Thank you, Professor, for an amazing workshop today. It's truly, I believe everyone here know quite these two sounds quite well. So if anyone's here who has now questions, comments, or greetings, you can right now post in the chat to us. Professor, while we're waiting, is really great. We received the two songs, the videos, and so also I believe it's truly a great success to your student and the conductor and your student group also. And if I may, I have a question for this. How long have you practiced for these two songs in your students group?
Oh, how long? Well, not long at all, because as I say, we meet on a Sunday night, and then on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we rehearse morning and afternoon, but on a big program with a lot of different pieces. So not so long. Anybody who's worked with me, I think, over the years knows that I'm very, very keen on speeding up people's response. As I said at the beginning, I'm so keen that young singers can read and respond as quickly as their instrumental colleagues. My experience has been that we're getting there, but we still tend to be slow, and I think it's because it's made too easy for us. We need to be kind of pushed and up against a timetable, which is what you're talking about. So, yeah, we have to be quick, and we know the concert is on the Saturday, and we have no time to hang about, and I think that's good training.
Amazing work. I need to say amazing work. And I also got a question from the audience. And what do you think the most important things to do as a conductor when you got a new piece or when you conduct a new choir?
Well, I think my own feeling is that when you arrive in front of a new choir, not too forcefully, but you introduce yourself and you show what's very important to you. And for me, that is training them to be as good musicians as they are singers. So the listening aspect. And so I always start off, as I was saying earlier, with warm-ups and little exercises which are connected to the piece we're about to study, but contain a few things where the singers have to think for themselves. And what I never do is play, I might give them one pitch on the piano, but no more than that. And I never would have anybody doing a warm-up with somebody accompanying, because that takes away the whole point of it. So listening is what I try to do, and then hopefully by the end of 10 minutes or so, the choir has got an idea of the sort of things which I think are important, and then you start your work together.
Thank you so much. And also other questions. I believe you already answered for that. Can you expand more on the training of reading with young singers?
Are you talking about their voices?
Yeah, I believe it's
Yeah.
voices, yeah.
Well, I think this is a hard and difficult, long question. I try to take their voices in as natural state as I can, and I always start from soft. I get them to try to experiment with sound, what they can do with this part of their resonant chambers, and that's why I do a lot of humming and soft singing. Don't sing too loud too soon. Try to think of the sound being centered, which is why the humming and the ooh and the ee and those sorts of sounds are very useful. And don't let them break out too soon. And particularly this word, which we hear a lot in America anyway, don't let the sound spread, because then you lose the beauty of it. So I think about that quite a bit. Funny enough, I've been listening to some Chinese choirs recently, and I was very interested to notice that the danger with the sound to my ear is it goes sideways, and it needs to be centered. So it's just like a clarinet player, the sound is, focused in the middle. So I do a lot of that sort of thing, but don't get too loud too soon.
Understand. Thank you so much. And the last question we have right now is what skills you demand more from your conducting students?
What skills do I demand from them? Well, gosh. Well, to train their ears. The oral skills of conductors in many ways is more important. The hands, you can get away with all kinds of things with your hands. But being quick with your ear is something which, in my opinion, is not perhaps concentrated on quite enough. It depends where you are, but the training of the ear is critically important. So that comes, when I was teaching on a permanent basis, that would be very high on the priority. And then you try to get them, I think, to show how they feel about the music with their hands. So that they're not simply beating the patterns. You need to understand your patterns, but you show with your hands. And I'm actually rather keen on the idea you can show words with your hands to a degree. And you can trace and you can paint pictures without getting too flamboyant. But so you're always sharing ideas with your singers as you conduct. So those are the kind of things I concentrated on.
Fascinating. I need to learn conductor right now, right? So also, thank you so much, Professor. And thank you everyone for being here today. And I believe everyone got a quite good enjoy for this masterclass. And next week at Saturday, at the same time, we will have also our fourth workshop by Professor Stephen Darlington. And I hope everyone could join us next week also. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.